Greetings, David Daoud of Compliance Standards. And in this episode of Compliance Standards, the Trending Path podcast, we zoom out from pallets and from serial numbers to look at ITAD as a 30-year strategic story. My guest today is Dave Bernstein, CEO of Anything IT, who came into the industry at Y2K and has spent decades building a channel-driven, certification-heavy ITAD model that now serves both Fortune-grade enterprises and the US federal government in roughly equal measures. We talk about a number of things, including how obsolescence became a permanent business function, how certifications and compliance as a service change the risk equation, why Anything IT doubles down on resellers and OEM partnerships instead of going direct, and of course, how AI hardware, solar panels, and federal work are reshaping what it means to run an independent ITAD company today.
I'm Dave Bernstein, the CEO of Anything IT. We've been in business for 33 years. As an ITAD, myself and my business partner Vlad Stelmack, sort of grew up inside the ITAD industry with the birth of the Y2K, which was the first time companies had to figure out what they were going to do with their old stuff.
Mm.
And we are a certified, eSteward certified, NAID AAA certified data destruction, ISO 9001, ISO 14001 certified ITAD provider. We are very much into the reuse markets, although being an e-stewards, as you understand, the compliance to follow the downstream and the demanufacturing and the recycling is something we're very, very focused on. Compliance is one of the most important aspects that we follow. To your point about your webinar yesterday, which I found very insightful and pretty accurate, where the future of ITAD is really about helping customers manage liability,
Mhm.
manage the process of the disposition. We do operate nationwide. We have global partnerships. And as you can imagine, being in this business for 33 years, we've seen a lot, done a lot, but we are really having, understanding this business, have a great relationships in this business, both with competitors and with clients, and really understand the importance of what ITAD brings. And it's overdue as an industry. And I applaud all of the partners, all the ITAD organizations that have gone ahead and gotten certified and really try to bring this business forward as not just a garbage dump kind of model, but really something
Yeah.
that is incredibly important in modernization planning.
Yeah. What's your trajectory personally, Dave? How do you, what did you go to school for that? Was it, sort of a natural extension to maybe an IT job? What is it that got you into this industry personally?
Well, we're kind of a unique story. We started the company on a boat in Jersey City, New Jersey, 33 years ago. And basically, as a result of the Y2K, I was working for a repair company. So 30 years ago, repairing
Ah, okay.
computers was clearly more of a model than what it has evolved to, although it might be going back to it the way
Yeah,
constrained products are going these days. But
that's right.
um, the Y2K for us was a learning experience because that was the first time companies had to figure out what they were going to do with their old equipment. And we started to see the elements of, what happens, the decision making that would go into it. And, really the lack of understanding. When you go into New York City and you're talking to major financial services companies about how they recycle their equipment, and it's the early 90s, and then they show, oh, this is how we recycle our monitors. And they open a window on the third floor and start throwing monitors out the window into a dumpster on the street.
Yeah,
You realize the industry had a long way to go. Um,
yeah,
but I think those of us that have been in this space for that amount of time really understand how, the dot-com played a role in structuring what ITAD was going to become. The unfortunate events of 9/11, I think, started to place a real focus on data security. And obviously, the internet playing the role that it does for the manufacturing and processing speeds of technology. And of course, now we're with AI and cloud and cyber, and things are just continuing to accelerate. And so all the folks in ITAD, I'm sure, understand the same thing and are seeing the same thing. And
Yeah.
that's how we
Yeah.
evolved to where we are today.
And just to put where the company stands in geographic context, you are based in New Jersey, and
Correct.
do you consider yourself sort of a regional player, the tri-state, or do you are you active above and beyond that? If you have federal contracts, I'm
Mhm.
assuming geography doesn't really matter.
Geography doesn't matter for us. We do have nationwide reach. We have global reach. There is an effort underway for a significant expansion for the organization, and we're really excited about it. There's going to be some exciting things happening that I'm sure you'll hear about at some point. Um, but yeah, we are. We try to be very scalable and modular for clients. There was a
Yeah.
time in this business where there was no budget for ITAD. Companies didn't even understand what it was, and they certainly weren't allocating money for it. And so the understanding of helping customers recognize the importance of it before there were a lot of laws or case studies about things going sideways for companies not really having processes in place. It's been about relationships, and so being a nationwide company, we've been really fortunate to have great relationships within the industry as well as with clients.
Yeah, and I think if I sort of use my math and the number of years that you've been in business, you started this business early 1990s, I would imagine,
1992.
and if 92, and so that's a period like before the term ITAD even
Correct.
existed, right?
Correct.
So most e-waste folks, entrepreneurs of that era came through generally the e-scrap metal or the surplus auction
Correct.
business. Walk us through the first deal, if you can, if you remember, or the first contract that made you realize, that gave you sort of that aha moment that this was an industry, not just a hustle.
Well, there were a couple of early on points that started to make sense about where this, you could read the tea leaves a little bit, right? Remember, we're talking the early 90s, so there was a lot of things that we take for granted today that didn't even exist back then. But one of the things having coming out of the parts industry from the very beginning was recognizing the value of parts in them of itself, right? And how the equipment, once it's retired, how there was a very limited reuse. And so we were doing well, buying and selling, devices, breaking them down for parts, and working with maintenance companies, companies
Yeah,
like Decision One and some of the other, on-site maintenance companies back in the day that were stocking parts. And then we started to get relationships with corporations in the area and some service providers, consultants, integrators. And one of the things that started to really, you know, I guess crystallized for us was clients, at that point wanted to just get rid of stuff because it was clear it was taking up space in rooms, in office buildings, in under desks, in closets, or in warehouses, and it was more of an eyesore and an economic issue from a real estate perspective than it was anything about whether or not there was data on it or where it was going to go as far as downstream and things like that. So we started to see that and play along with as the dot-com era started to kind of unfold and then the dot-com bubble burst. We started to
hmm
see how there was massive workforce reductions. Companies were closing down. My partner and I actually took down the entire American Stock Exchange in New York City.
Oh,
And so yeah, maybe part of it was, being, in the New York metro area, understanding the economics of real estate and the economics of, having space in the offices at that time and what it meant to upgrade. And remember, the devices themselves were much larger, right, than they are
of
today.
course, of
So
course.
the weights of moving it around, compact computer used to have something called the luggable, which was, a 15-pound thing with a handle, and you'd be walking around with this thing or a word processor. So I think it started to evolve for us where we started to see that this was an inevitable thing. Obsolescence, we realized was never going to go out of style. right? It's the one aspect of technology that just cannot be changed, right? I mean, there's no devices that are going to last forever. As a matter of fact, today you can understand that the way technology moves, the lifespans are getting even shorter, right?
Yeah.
So I think we were just very fortunate early on to see a lot of the aspects of technology evolving and the rapid pace at the time of how that was changing how businesses acquired technology, used it, supported it, and then ultimately retired it. And that's kind of how we just continue to go on the path that we're on today.
Hey, going back to your, your New York Stock Exchange
American.
project.
American.
Uh, okay, perfect. Was it a mostly a physical initiative? I mean, was it essentially a removal of hardware from a one side to the other? It's physical and it's a lot less, compliance regulations, etc. really didn't exist. Those terms were not there yet.
Yeah, I would say it was probably more about, again, the real estate. They were
Gotcha.
shutting down the entire exchange, so it had to be cleared out, right? And the building wanted everything out, just like any other landlord or what have you. And so it was a pretty intense project over the course of days. We had to pull out the cabling, we had to take down all of the displays, we had to deal with all the PCs, all of the servers, everything. So it was more of a move than it was you could call it a decommissioning, but at the time, we did have to provide inventory reports, we did have to do the data destruction, but to your point, it wasn't mature the way it is today, right? So it was about more of an action of just clearing it out than it was about disposition, if you will.
Yeah. And
So,
what's the weight of the complicated stuff, not the physical stuff today, now that things have moved, now that all their stakeholders are getting involved, regulations, standards, certifications. What's the percent in terms of your obligations, your workload, etc., that is not necessarily that physical part of the business. That is sort of the what I call the consultative part of the business.
well, for us, I've always been a very big proponent of certifications, very big
Yeah,
supporter of it. I knew for us, it was these are investments you have to make in your business, but in my position, I felt like, how can I consult with somebody on the best practices if I don't follow them myself? Right. And I
yeah,
can't demonstrate that we go through the painstaking process of not only being obviously an e-stewards and a NAID and ISO, but we are, what I understand to be the first federal contractor providing ITAD, and we've been doing that for 20 years. So I think it's about um, bringing the credibility of the certifications, obviously past performance and understanding what you've done, what you've seen. I think the craziest thing, and you could ask many different ITADs this question, is every enterprise IT environment may have different views of what ITAD is, right? So if you're consulting, about what these best practices are, in many cases, even today, you still have organizations that have a perception of what ITAD is, and part of the consulting is to really explain to them what's possible and what isn't, believe it or
yeah,
not, right? And
exactly.
so I think that's where uh, credibility has become very important for us, and that's why I believe certifications are so valuable, because we can show that we're audited, we're subject to surprise audits, we're very focused on delivering the best practices of this industry, and
Mm,
obviously to separate ourselves from those that don't have certifications but use the language of, oh, we follow this, but they don't
yeah,
actually have it. I think educating customers is, consulting on this is one of the most important things we certified ITADs can really do, because that's the thing that scares me about this business is that it's not regulated. Really, anybody can stick a green leaf on their website or truck, really, and say they do data destruction, say that they do ITAD services, but they may not be
yeah,
following best practices and they may not be doing things legally. And it puts the
exactly.
customer, the enterprise customer, at a very vulnerable position because if they're not educated on what these certifications are, what these best practices are, they're trusting an organization that looks shiny, looks pretty, but may not really be following the standards that are necessary, especially for the regulated industries that many ITADs support.
Are you satisfied with the predictability of what's going to happen in the market in the next 3, 6, 8, 9 months, a year? I mean, I know that predictability has always been something very difficult for many ITAD companies. They just don't know how their customers are going to react based on a number of factors, pricing, refresh cycles, all that stuff. And quite often I'm told that the sales cycle is anywhere between 1, even 2 years. In the channels, when you have third-party players, how is it? Is it doubly hard, or harder, or do you have a better sense of predictability and forecasting now that you are a bigger group, if you will,
I
different
think it's
stakeholders? Yeah.
I think it's just a matter of the relationship. You had said something to me a long time ago when we first met that, you believe ITADs, you have to be a little bit crazy to own an ITAD because of the so many variables and so much lack of, the ability to really predict what's going to happen, right? Um, so I think it's very relationship oriented to have a sense of where things are going in our model. Um, I think that if anything, in this day and age, predictability and technology are not exactly hand in hand. I think, as much as a year ago, if anybody would have thought saw the memory, pricing going the way that it is a
Yeah.
year ago, right? No, I mean, I'm sure many ITADs are
Oh.
sitting there saying, I wish I would have held, what I had a year ago because it's worth three
Yeah.
times what it was, So
Yeah.
I think it's a very difficult market to forecast, with absolute certainties,
Yeah.
especially with supply chain, especially with obviously tariffs in one way, shape, or form, right? And the economy. You know, if you think about it, right, many ITADs didn't see when the pandemic hit the amount of need for mobile devices for people to work from home. And there was a major run
Exactly.
on, right, used laptops and things like that. So you can't, as an ITAD, I think you have to just go with what you see in front of you, make educated guesses on where you think things may evolve, right? Maybe because of AI, it's a little bit easier now because there's another, platform other than just getting on the internet that hardware manufacturers and software are going to build their solutions around, right? And with an understanding of where we are today with AI and cyber, the processing power is so much more important, right? There used to be a time back in the 90s and the early 2000s where the hardware kind of drove the software. You know what I mean? Like IBM would
Yeah.
come out with a new PC and HP, and all the software would be built around running, on that hardware. Now it's completely flipped. The software is now driving the hardware. The software is forcing hardware manufacturers to increase their, you know, capabilities, RAM, processing power to meet the required standards to run the software. I don't see that changing anytime soon. And I think that's where the AI model gives a little bit more predictability into the rate of change that an ITAD can look at in the industry and say, yeah, stuff that was being able to be held 4 or 5 years by customers may not hold up anymore. The cycle may go shorter. And that food chain, yeah, as devices get pushed down, may change as well. In the obsolete market, devices with no value, we could be looking at 4-year-old devices in a couple years that have absolutely no value because they won't
Yeah.
run on the latest and greatest AI platforms that are going to be required. And so you could almost see that shrinking. You know what I mean? It may take a little longer than that, but processing power is really going to be the big engine for how hardware is going to run to match the software.
Well, what happens when I see it, a little bit differently. I mean, there are other sort of factors that play in the way I see, it just reminds me of a presentation I gave to a Japanese company a while back in their headquarters in Tokyo, and this is a gigantic electronics manufacturers. I will not name the name, but you can certainly guess who they are.
Sure.
They they were selling laptops, smartphones, etc., and they really thought that they had what it takes because it's the brand. It's the brand. We are the brand, and it was, and they really, they for a moment they made fun of me because I told them you're not only losing market share, but you're going to completely evaporate from the marketplace. And they said, well, this is impossible. And they almost complained to my supervisors. And my argument was, you're building this smartphone, it's beautifully designed, but you're handing it over to two non-direct competitors. One is the carrier, they call it AT&T or Verizon, who's going to own that relationship forever by virtue of their monthly bills,
Hmm.
monthly service. And then, of course, because it's a smartphone, most likely an Android, you're gonna hand over that relationship to Google. And I said, these are the ones that actually own the relationship, not you, because you don't even have a clue who the customer is. It's going
Right.
through a series of things. So I do believe that, to your point, also, in addition to what you said, I do believe that customer relationship, intricate customer relationship, is absolutely a make or break. I mean,
Hmm.
if you don't have that sort of tight relationship, if it's transactional, you're bidding on lowest common denominator.
Hmm.
I don't think this could last because next round they will call somebody else. I think being able to build intricate relationships through consultative models, I think to me are very important. Of the of the channel partners, I'm curious, which ones are the easiest to work with? You named VARs, obviously you have the OEMs, you have the resellers. Of all these guys that you're serving, as a white label, which ones typically are, pretty cool, easy to deal with, understanding of the issues, or are they all, my margin, my margin, my margin?
I listen, I love them all. They're like my kids.
They're like
Um,
children.
they all have intricacies, and there's many of them that we work with. And they all have goals, and they're all battling it out with each other, right?
Of course. Yeah.
Um, I don't know that is really any easier or harder model. The reality is, like any industry, even the facts that people change jobs and change companies, and that relationship is, you know, always something that has to be at the forefront of any business, partnership is performance and quality, right? And transparency. And I think that if you are honest and you provide a really good service, and they know that when you say you're going to do something, you're going to do it, they all pretty much respond the same, right? There's
Yeah.
a loyalty factor that I think is underestimated in our business. It's not like it was years ago, yeah, where you had junk guys, garbage guys, throwing low numbers out to pick up stuff or to deal with, yeah, I won't charge you to pick it up or this or that. And some ITADs maybe still run that model today, but I think it's for the resellers. I think it's really more about, are you a good partner?
Hmm.
Are you honest? Are you there for them when they need you? And when things go sideways, which they do, how do you fix it? How do you stand up and either take responsibility or at least step in and help fix and manage the situation? And I think that is a universal thing. I don't think it's really easier or harder. The type, a partnership is a partnership. And what I have found is if you do a good job, if you're honest, and you really they feel like you're focused on their best interests, and that even goes with our direct clients as well. I mean, I just feel that's a fundamental part of business. If you are true to who you are, honest about what you do, transparent about your process, you're not really giving the customer a reason to leave you. You know what I mean? And
Yeah.
that, I think, is how we have always built our business. And it's how we will continue to build our business because that is a definition for myself and Vlad, or my business partner, in how we operate. And so it's not really a type of business. I think it's the fundamentals of business that really make it work.
So you're suggesting that there is loyalty as well. Loyalty exists. It's not just cutthroat business is
Uh,
business.
well, look, you're going to get that. You're going to get the
Yeah.
cutthroat. It's the realities, especially when people change companies and somebody else comes in and they have a different mindset. But in our part, I've been working with some resellers for 20 years and some manufacturers for over 20
Yeah.
years, and that to me spells, it speaks to they don't have to worry about us. And maybe to them that means a lot, right? I would like to think a lot of ITADs in the business have loyal customers, right? I would think that a lot of the ones that are the bigger ITADs, certainly have developed relationships with their clients where those clients feel comfortable, they know what they're getting. They look, if the pricing doesn't work, they can go and maybe work it out and have a
Yeah.
conversation about it. So I do believe the loyalty exists, but it's not easy to earn it. And it's even harder now. But I believe if you work hard and focus on that, it will pay dividends, but you got to be patient. It's the long game. This is not a quick hitter type situation. I only look to develop long-term relationships with our clients and partners. I'm not interested in, one hit wonders. I'm not looking at the biggest deal all the time. I'm
Yeah, of
totally
course.
fine to hit for average. Home runs are great, but the consistency, the deliverable, that relationship to me means everything. And it's been one of the best parts about being a business owner, I think, is when you see that loyalty from customers, and you feel good about them trusting you and you knowing that them knowing that you'll be there for them.
Are you seeing part of this, what we call loyalty driven by perhaps, and this is a suggestion that I'm making, a maturing of the sector to the point that there's a cost for switching. In other words, if you are a client, whether it's a channel or a direct customer, using your services and you offer all sorts of sophisticated or compliance issues, etc., doing the right thing, could it be that there is also a cost for going to a competitor?
Absolutely. I mean, look, in any business, clients probably would prefer to not have to switch vendors, put things out to RFP, due diligence, educating, about that company and I always look at it as when we're working with a new client or a new partner, it's almost like we're dating, right? You got to get to know each other.
Yeah.
And you got to know what's needed, what isn't needed, how each side operates. So yeah, I mean, I think in any industry, switching vendors is not something I think companies like to do. Depending on the industry, it may be the only way they operate, which is lowest price or something along those lines, depending on the business. But for ITAD, I mean, I think most clients would prefer to stay if they feel good about who they're with, and they know that there's again that transparency is so important, because there's a lot of bad actors in ITAD, unfortunately, and they give the ones the folks like us who try to do the right thing a bad name, right? Because there's this sort of perception,
Yeah, of course.
and so to my point about educating them about certifications and what really matters, you know, some clients find out the hard way that the relationship is more important than maybe a couple of percentage points on what they may get back in value or the cost of the service or what have you. I'm not saying, I mean, we're not the cheapest, we're not the most expensive, but we're reasonable. And like I said, I think if you do a good job and you're honest, I think it means a lot to these customers, more so than they may even admit, because at the end of the day, let's face it, to your point about compliance, nobody wants to have their name thrown around as their company name thrown around as not handling their IT devices in the right way.
Yeah, and before I hit the record button, we talked a little bit about the competitive landscape. How concerned would you be if a much bigger company, a publicly traded company, say an Iron Mountain or a PE-backed roll-up, approaches the sort of the VARs and and the companies that you deal with and offer them, let's say, a bundle deal at a lower margin with global coverage. How concerned are you? Particularly, obviously, we know that many of these companies are increasingly investing. We don't know if this is going to be a transient situation because after all, most of these companies, the ITAD or the life cycle management is a unit within a broader company. And usually when things go south, the ITAD company is the first one to suffer, even if it's actually doing very well. So we don't know what's going to happen among these very large companies, but it's still a valid point to ask, how does an independent ITAD company prepares and carries a defensive approach on a competitive space when a larger company with a lot of resources could encroach in its domain.
Well, there's always been that risk,
Yeah,
you go
yeah,
back to the Arrow days, right? You go back to, there's always been bigger, companies around in this business.
yeah,
I think bigger isn't always better. Um,
sure.
I think that the relationship, the performance, and the economics, quite frankly, depending on the type of client that's being pursued or partner, what have you, the reality is you have to understand your place in that market in the reseller area. And a lot of the bigger guys would prefer, understandably, to go direct to these clients. Better margin, right? Better control over the relationship with the end user client. Um, Being a channel company is not easy. It's a lot more difficult, and it requires
Very
a lot
difficult.
more attention to the relationship. And so to me, you know, it's just like anything else. I really believe this. If we do a good job and we're honest, the biggest and the baddest can come their way, and they may take them on and try them and what have you. But at the end of the day, again, it's going to come back to relationships. It's going to come back to performance, and it's going to come back to transparency. And so bigger could be better, depending, but sometimes it's not.
Yeah.
And that's just what it
Oh,
is.
absolutely. Yeah,
You
yeah. No,
know.
I agree. It's not a it's not a definite final metric in the ITAD space. Bigger is not necessarily better.
It's
In
also
fact,
about
bigger.
yeah, but it's
Yeah.
also about your ability to change or pivot for a client. We are my company, of course, anything IT deals with literally anything IT related, right? So we see lots of different unique situations come up with clients, and decisions need to be made very quickly for clients sometimes, and how we perform even with short notice, or how things evolve, or how quick we have to put something in place can't always be performed by a larger organization either. Depending on that organization, I'm not saying all of them couldn't do it, but we are bigger than people think. Let's put it that way.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah,
And that's
absolutely.
okay with me.
Absolutely.
That's okay with me. But to your point, it's always a risk, right? There's the competitive landscape's always changing.
Yeah, that keeps you making improvements, right? That keeps
Of
you
course,
revisiting your business
100%.
practices, your go-to market, your relationship with your clients. Makes you better. What makes a company, let's say an end user client, not go to their primary tech supplier? Why is it that they would go to you? Why is it that a federal agency would go to you and not to Dell or HP or whomever is supplying them with a brand new equipment? I'm curious.
Well, it could be a lot of reasons. You know, it's not easy to work with different manufacturers every time you want to go for different products. And to the point about the bigger, more expensive. I've seen how some of these, manufacturer programs work. We represent some manufacturers through white label. So I understand there's an effort there to have them manage it, but it may not always be the easiest. There's a lot of commitment that those manufacturers want from those clients in a lot of cases to be able to provide those services to them, right? We know those manufacturers are in business to really sell the new products. They're not in
Hmm.
business to be ITADs. They do it, and certainly Dell is one of them, and I'm sure they do, very well with it. But that may not work for a client in a hybrid environment, right? Who's got to deal with a lot of different types of equipment. a lot of different types of changes and requirements in terms of what kind of reporting needs to happen, the management of logistics, all the different variables. So, um, I think it's based upon what the client, needs, what the manufacturers are willing to give. Um, and I think the manufacturer's got to be careful. That's this, what's that expression? Jack of all trades, master of nothing. You know, if manufacturers really want to be ITADs, then that's going to require them to be, very disciplined, and some of them are, and do a good job at it. But it doesn't always meet the need of a client that's constantly evolving in their technology. So it really will vary on what the client's needs are.
Yeah, and it reminds me of a little story that I'll share with you that several years ago I advised a big media company in New York on their ITAD program, and they were at that phase where they're selecting vendors, and they ended up with a short list of two companies. One is the gigantic one, a three-letter leasing and financing company, which I will not name, but you can guess who that is. And then another one is an independent ITAD company. And the psychology was was mind-boggling. In fact, it was so telling that I learned a lesson from it, that quite often vendor selection, nowadays, obviously, it's mostly RFPs. There's a lot of AI behind that stuff doing all sorts of calculations and grading, but the psychology is there. And I recall two of the folks that did the due diligence loved the independent vendor. And they came to me and they said, look, David, our bosses naturally like IBM. Oops, I said the name. Naturally liked IBM, but but we like the small vendor. Well, they're more flexible. They're easy to deal with. They're reachable anytime. And I said, well, isn't that the case for with the other one? They said, well, the other one is like organizing a wedding, which I'm not entirely sure what that means. It probably means it's extremely difficult.
It is. Yeah, I can imagine.
And so they really wanted me to help them make the case in front of their bosses. And I said, no, as an independent analyst, I can't do that. It's up to you, on the procurement side to figure out how to make the case. And you have all sorts of arguments that you can make. But psychology plays a role for sure. And flexibility, being able to be there, responsive to your client's needs, uh, even if sometimes you're not able to fully solve the problem. But being there is half of the solution. Just being there.
Yeah, I think one of the things about at least anything IT customers is they know my team will run through a brick wall for our clients. They know that about us, and that's
Yeah.
something you build over time. That's not something you can just say you'll do. Now, I'm not surprised that they were leaning in towards the independent ITAD a little bit more than a big entity. Um, it because when that phone call comes, is somebody really going to get back to them? In the bigger entity is you know operator controlled type organizations, businesses that are more independent, at least, and I'm speaking generally, of course, they have to have a relationship. They have to make sure that their clients are satisfied. If IBM loses a client here and there, you know, that's not going to maybe impact them the same way as the independent ITAD. It depends. And
Yeah.
so I think, it's gonna mean a lot to the customer. And it just comes down to the mindset of ease of doing business. Economics are always going to be important. I'm never going to say money doesn't matter. It always matters.
Of course.
But again, when you need something, or when something has to be done, or things have to be organized in a certain way, how fast can we be to help them address it, right? And basically been there, show me, if you've been there and you've done it and you show that you can support organizations that are larger or smaller as an independent, that's great, right? The big guys, they usually go game hunting anyway for the bigger clients, the
Yeah.
enterprise, so there's a whole subset of medium-sized businesses or small businesses that the three-letter word company may not even have interest in working with, or the OEM may have no interest in working with, yet they are maybe not a big head count. but they are very technology reliant, their organization, and they need the same kind of services that a big company would need. So, everybody to us is the same. They're valuable. We take them extremely seriously, no matter what their size, and we are going to be there for them. And we have 33 years to demonstrate that. And I think that's probably one of the most important factors. Uh, I don't know what the percentages of companies being around, starting on a boat and then still being around 33 years later, but I can't imagine it's a very high percentage. And so you have to be able to navigate and make good decisions. It hasn't always been rosy, but the thing our clients know about us is that we're going to be there for them. And I think at the end of the day, for any
Yeah.
business, that's what you want out of your vendor.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. You do hold a GSE schedule, and from what you said earlier, you've been serving the federal market for a couple of decades.
Correct.
I think I saw somewhere that you disclosed secret and top secret cleared facilities and staff as part of what you do. How much of anything IT's revenue or business comes from government versus commercial in general? How big is the federal space for you guys?
It's
Or
about
government
50.
space? Yeah.
It's about 50-50.
Oh, that's a
And we
big
do that
chunk.
on purpose. It's by design. Obviously, we've had pandemics, and you've had where government was the only thing operating, and then you've had government shutdowns where commercial was operating. Um, for us, it's a good balance. Um, I'm incredibly loyal to customers. I have a particular, obviously, sentimental attachment to our government in terms of being somebody that wants to help them and protect, you know, uh, national security, and understanding, the nuances of how government works. So for us, it's a nice balance. It will continue to be a balance of both, and that's by design. And yeah, I mean, I think for us, that's a market that's incredibly difficult to manage, to incredibly difficult to break into as a direct vendor
Yeah.
for the federal government. Um, that was part of the reasoning we went for it so many years ago, you know? So I think for us, it's just about understanding, bringing best practices to the public sector as much as it is bringing best practices to the private sector and seeing
Hmm.
both sides in how they operate. And there are differences, there are tangible differences in how they operate. And the understanding of both, I think, has made us a better organization.
Yeah, and I know you navigated the tariffs as best as you can, but to be probably more potentially disruptive was sort of the Doge driven contract review and spending freeze that we saw early on, and I
Mhm.
don't know if it's still ongoing. Has that affected your federal pipeline?
Um, as Yes, but it wasn't as bad as you would think,
Okay.
So I think, of course, the workforce reductions were painful to watch. All these government workers. Um, as a government contractor for as long as we've been, I know and have lived the inefficiencies of the government for many years, and understanding how long things take, how difficult it can be, how misunderstood they are as an organization, if the government is what it is. So yeah, it played a role. But again, it's like anything else, because we have such extensive past performance in that market. I think a lot of government feel very comfortable with us. And because we have relationships with manufacturers and we have relationships with integrators and resellers, and we can fit a lot of different scenarios for clients in terms of what they need to accomplish, either with us directly or through some kind of a model with a manufacturer or a partner. So, Doge was impacting everybody.
Gotcha. Yeah.
I think you see it in just certain services that were available from the government before Doge, and then what's happened after. So
Gone all of a sudden, yeah.
I think it played a role. It was impactful, but it has not hurt us, thankfully, in the way that maybe many others would have been hurt, or were hurt in terms of a lot of IT resellers and things like that who were impacted clearly, and the way that they're vetting, vendors in that space now. It's a lot more difficult now to get into that space. They scrutinize you even a lot, um,
Yeah.
and it's a high bar. And for us, thankfully, we are on the side of having understood that and been able to navigate it. So it was impactful, but thankfully, I don't think it was a point because I think of our experience. It didn't hurt us the same way it probably hurt some other types of vendors.
Speaking of anything IT, you say you're not, you don't pick and choose what electronics you're going to treat, but surely there are things you're just not going to take. I mean, you take home appliances, for example.
We have been, do we take them? Yes. Do we don't like
Okay.
to? There's sometimes, that, the ITAD's coming. And then so one time we even got a kitchen sink.
Oh,
So,
Lord.
everything but. Um, I mean, you have what's defined as an IT device, right? I mean, now, yes,
Exactly.
some appliances are considered smart devices. Um,
Yeah.
Appliances, I think, have to be handled a certain way also. I mean, I think there's a
Yeah.
separate type of a downstream for that kind of stuff. So, we'll delineate between what is considered an appliance or a home appliance versus an IT appliance because there is a difference. Um,
Yeah. Yeah.
but of course, there's things that we won't take, but it's not because we won't want to. It's because the demanufacturing won't allow us. Maybe it has Freon in it, right? Or maybe it's something that has a particular type of material in it that our downstream isn't prepared to handle. And it's really more about that than not taking something. It's about can we properly manage the downstream of it.
Any deal with retailers, sort of the plug with the consumer market, is there, or in the small business as well? I mean, do you have that link, or and you do?
We do, yeah. With some retailers, we don't deal direct with the client. We don't do, like the big community drop-offs, stuff like that. There's a lot of ITADs that are in that business. We're a little bit more strategic in where we operate, but small businesses, absolutely. We work with them, and anything in the commercial or obviously public sectors, we will work with. Just not like an end user who wants to drop off their Atari system from 1972. Although we would take that because
Oh, I would
we do
take
have a
that
little
one too.
museum, believe it or not, in our place that we've
Oh, I
got
bet, I
some
bet.
amazing things. You would be an original Mac 2, things like that. But
Look, I mean, if you create an online retail for vintage stuff,
mm,
you'd see a different market
oh yeah,
and
I'm
probably
sure.
much higher value than if you were to do anything else with them for sure.
Oh yeah,
What about AI hardware,
yes.
Dave? Everybody's talking about AI. It's all over the map, and you can see that those unprecedented volumes of GPU and accelerators that are going to through disposition, but these things hold value that's very different
Hmm.
from your standard laptop or your basic servers, right? Are you handling AI infrastructure now?
Yes.
And if so, how do you price residual value in those gears?
Well, the hyperscalers, I mean, it's the same thing. Our relationships on the resale side allow us to really have good visibility into what the markets are trading at for that type of equipment. So we get real time understanding of where things are trading, values of equipment. So we are very focused on getting our clients the maximum return on their equipment. That's always been a foundation of anything IT. And so for that type of equipment, we see it. We deal with it. It's great stuff, as you can imagine. And if it has RAM in it, it's even better, as you know. And so, yeah, I mean, it's fundamental of modernization now. It's just the way technology is evolving. So, yeah, we deal with it. We see a healthy amount of it. We hope to see more, and I think we will as the industry continues to evolve. And yeah, it's just another part of the customer base or product lines that we service. A lot of different models and a lot of different types of scenarios that
Oh,
are playing out right now. And I'm
absolutely.
I'm happy for the industry to get recognized this way. I really am. There's a lot of guys, and ladies who have been running ITADs for as long as we have, and maybe not as long. But you know what? We're an industry that's finally starting to get the credibility that it deserves.
Yeah.
Whether or not that's through the news or through economic interest, what have you. I think the best story to be told here is the maturity of an industry that started out as a garbage industry and has now evolved into a necessary part of the entire modernization strategy. And I think that's going to lead to a lot of different opportunities for a lot of different ITADs, and we're going to look at all of it. We continue to look at all of it.
Yeah, absolutely. And so, what is it that comes to mind when somebody engages with you in discussion over AI? Uh, my sense of what my reading of feedback from the industry, it's very much AI is very much underhyped. And I realize it's not necessarily a problem coming out of the ITAD industry. I've been engaging with a number of manufacturing sites, and they themselves are struggling. They would love to be doing AI. They just don't know how to do it, given the current circumstances or their current environment, and they're not ready for it. The data is still siloed everywhere. Bringing it together is a nightmare. But more than anything else, it's like what is AI? I am actually on that side of the debate where AI, I tell everyone, is going to be revolutionary. I mean, there's no way in the world you look at what Anthropic and Claude and Gemini and all these guys are doing from the LLM perspective, not from what you see, on your computer or on your phone. If you look at what NVIDIA and Siemens and even Meta glasses are doing, Meta glasses essentially replace basically the need for supervisor, replace for the need for manuals, for training purposes. They basically give a view of a device or a product in a way that is virtually impossible, that you have to go back to class and have tons of manuals. So I think that the applications of AI in the ITAD world are going to be revolutionary, but I am getting a lot of pushback from your peers about that, and largely not their fault because the entire industrial complex is still not there yet.
Mhm.
Where do you sit? What's the feedback from your customers? Are they interested in all those telemetry data to make sure that the ESG position is clearly stated, tracked, marketed, etc.? Or, is it just some of us analysts kind of wishful thinking?
It is industry specific. Some clients really need that more than others. I think that's how I see it. There's so many options, in the AI space right now, in terms of what companies can use. And we all know how this goes. This is very similar to the dot-com era, right? There was a bubble, and I don't want to say AI is a bubble, but it's certainly behaving like one. And so I think, you've got to be realistic about what's possible today, and what will last. The type of data that clients are looking for today, I think it's expanding. It has a lot to do with cost of ownership. It has a lot to do with understanding, how what they do impacts efficiencies for what they do. So, I haven't seen as much. I think there's a little bit more of a, you know, uh, hurry up and wait kind of mentality when it comes to this right now. I think a lot of companies are trying to figure out who the real players going to be in about 3 years, because what we see today may not very well not be who the players are. And I think that is playing a big role in the cadence that companies are taking when it comes to this type of a thing. You know what I mean? I think first they got to be able to get allocated the products they need to run the AI, because we all know that's an issue right now.
That's
Um,
right. That's right.
so I think it's really going to be about the industry that they're in, the messaging that they want to portray, the efficiencies that they need to, really make sure they have the capabilities to represent, and how they operate, right? The workforce is going to change a lot too as a result of AI, and I think that's something that's going to need to be looked at from how the educational system is set up today, and how, I don't understand why in high schools they don't have wood shop and all the different, trade type
Yeah,
skills they used
ab
to have,
absolutely.
the
Absolutely.
vocational stuff, which is, nothing wrong with any of those skills. And I think they're incredibly valuable. And I think that there's a lost art in electricians and plumbers, in, those types of skill sets. And, there's a lot of talk about it replacing AI and how it's going to replace the workforce. And I think it's going to shift. It's going to be impactful. It's up to the individuals to start thinking about where is the need still going to be, right? What kind of skill sets will there be? And the organizations are trying to do the same thing, and they're trying to figure out where they can be best positioned and how AI is going to get them there.
Yeah, I think there's the inevitability of having the hardware that's being sold now carrying AI gear and AI components
Mhm.
to be handled by the industry within 3, maybe even earlier than 3 years because of the rapid evolution of technology, forcing sort of this fast moving refresh cycle. At that point, yeah, unfortunately, at that point, you're going to have to deal with it. And to deal with it and how, data is no longer confined to the hard drive or the SSD. It's everywhere,
Correct.
with that NPU. And so this is sort of at least on the lowest denominator. But in the long run, I think what I'm more interested is really what is sort of the posture of a company for its own internal infrastructure, its management system. And there's got to be some reengineering. We're not there yet, to your point. I think
Right.
that the AI infrastructure is being built from the ground up. That's why you have all these billions of dollars spent by the hyperscalers. In fact, what's funny, and I noted that yesterday, I think, in back in November, it was X billion dollars. The next earning calls, which was like February, all of a sudden everything doubled in terms of the build out of data centers. And so already last year we were like, wow, this is a vortex. Now this is a voltex multiplied by two
Yes.
from a dollar perspective. So it tells you that in this case, the software came first, sort of, the LLM, the top software came first. The hardware is coming second. Then the applications are going to start to kick in, and you can see, a lot of work from NVIDIA and Dell on the factory of tomorrow. I am very
Mhm.
bullish on what Siemens is doing on the same thing. You have the wearables that are starting to show real applications that are going to affect sort of the factory floor for sure. So that would be for another discussion.
Absolutely. Always,
David, it
always looking to
was
have it.
thank you, sir. It was a pleasure having you. This time, I promise, it should be recorded. If not, I will not reach out again.
It's okay, Dave.
Thank you
That is a
very
pleasure.
much.
Pleasure speaking
Thanks a
with you.
lot.